And now, coming to you live from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California, it's the Sheena Metal Experience with your host, Sheena Metal, only on KGRA Digital Broadcasting.
Hi, and welcome to the Sheena Metal Experience on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Sheena Metal. I'm a psychic medium. I'm a paranormal investigator and survivor. I'm an interfaith minister. I'm a 29-year talk radio host in Los Angeles and beyond. I'm a creative and a performing artist, and I come to you live from my home in Southern California every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. This show is about spirituality. It's about humanity. It's about creativity. It's about passion. It's about service. It's about becoming and then being your best you in this big, beautiful world, and then inspiring others to do the same. And every week on the show, it may be my show. It is the Sheena Metal Experience after all, but it's always without a doubt your experience. And never forget that. My guest today is a wonderfully talented filmmaker, creative, paranormal investigator, documentarian, and I'm honored to have him here. He has been, amongst other things, part of the very famous San Pedro haunting case. Please welcome to the show, the wonderful Barry Conrad is here. How are you, my friend?
Great. Thank you, Sheena. It's great to be back.
So the other day, my best friend's husband, who's like my brother-in-law, he and I are the paranormal nuts in the family. And we like to watch paranormal while my best friend's off doing other things when I'm at her house. And I just the other day, for shits and giggles, Googled you on YouTube, and I came up with a documentary you made a while ago called An Unknown Encounter, a True Account of the San Pedro Haunting. And we were riveted through all 1 hour and 21 minutes of that. Wow. And I think the fact that it was shot close enough to the incident that you all were still so viscerally affected by it was brilliant. I think the San Pedro haunting is one of the top 5 scariest hauntings in modern America. And I think you do such a beautiful job of capturing that story that you're not only documenting, but we're also a part of, right? And I just thought it was brilliant. And I wanted to have you on the show to tell you that.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I was part of that. It was amazing. I think back on that. It's been 34 years ago.
Wow.
It was in 1989. I can't believe, time goes by so fast, and I can't believe it's been that long. But it was a real wild adventure, one heck of a haunting. Something you never forget.
It seems like that you all sort of became family with the lady that lived in the house. Like, she was not just, you were not just coming over to make a documentary or to film or investigate. Like, she was calling you in the middle of the night and saying, I'm freaked out. I can't live here any longer. This is too much. And, you really become close to people during paranormal investigations. You and the paranormal survivors can oftentimes become very tight, right? Because you're involved in this unknown phenomena that's oftentimes very scary and very sad and very fear-evoking, and you're all in it together.
Yeah, that is true. I remember I really felt kind of sad for Jackie. She had gone through a kind of a bad divorce, and she was trying to start a new life. She had an infant daughter. She had a little boy, 3 years old, named Jamie at the time, and all these things started happening to her. And so she was alone a lot of it, but she did have some really good friends like Chrissy Zivkovic and Susan Castaneda that were able to keep her company. And as a camera guy, I couldn't be there all the time. So I said, call me anytime. I asked her if I could record the phone call. She said, sure, because I wanted to document it. I wanted this to be the fish that didn't get away story.
Yes. Yeah. And,
so with
and
the camera,
you've done such a great job. How many different times have you been involved in a documentary project that was included in? Like, how many times have you documented that story?
Well, that's as far as that story goes, the actual story, I only documented it that one time. I was going back to the house quite frequently with Dr. Barry Tapp at the beginning, was brought me into the case. He got the phone call initially from Susan, Jackie's friend. I think
Right.
Jackie was a little embarrassed to talk to anybody at the time. She didn't think anybody would believe her.
Of
And then,
course.
he called me in, and he knows I did camera work. I've been on a couple things with him, but nothing ever really happened. There were some interesting cases, but I wanted to see something for myself. And I said, well, I was trained as a news cameraman, and I thought, from Ohio, and I worked at WKRC, and I worked in Denver for a while. You're always taught to get the story, capture it with the camera. You go after the story, get the beginning, the middle, everything, every component of it, and that is really what my focus was. From the very first night, I knew there was something in that house, and after that point, I thought, I really felt like this was an opportunity to really capture something that maybe no one had ever caught before. And that was the
Yeah.
impetus for me, motivation.
It's amazing. And I know I've talked about this before and told you that I used to work with a group that investigated historic locations, historic landmarks. And the first place I went with them was Fort MacArthur. And I also have a dear friend whose parents own a bunch of restaurants in San Pedro. And I have to tell you, the minute I enter the San Pedro city limits, I feel a paranormal heaviness in my solar plexus chakra. And I have my whole life. The first time that I ever went to Catalina was on the shuttle that leaves from San Pedro. And just being on that ship in that port, I felt this heaviness. And then as we went more out into the ocean, it disappeared. And then when we came back, I felt it again. That's a haunted town. And I'm sure all the water has to do with it. I'm sure all the international stuff coming in and out, the trade and the travel. But man, that is a haunted place. And you can pay me enough to live in San Pedro. No offense to people who live in San Pedro. It's too much. It's too much spiritually latent energy for me.
Yeah, I agree, Sheena. I mean, when you come down the Harbor Freeway and you dead end to Gaffey Street, as soon as
Yes.
you make a left, and that's how you would go to 11th Street where the haunting was taking place. I've told my friends, like Jeff and Barry Tapp and different people, I said, I could feel it. I could feel it. There was
Yes.
an effulgence, some kind of an atmosphere, a dark atmosphere that
Yes.
hooks up with you on a psychic level.
Yes.
And
100%.
that town, had a lot of sordidness to it originally. There was a street down there, I think it was called Beacon Street. And I believe that was where, a lot of seamen came back in, longshoremen came back in from working on ships. And the first place they would go would be Beacon Street. That's where all the bars were, And, prostitution, flourish. I'm sure all of those things, all the vices known to man, probably. But I remember speaking with a guy named Luke Coolgis. He's the guy who looked at the cord that was involved in our case around my friend's neck. We'll get to that in a minute. He had said
Yes.
that he grew up there and he knew a lot about the history. And he says you wouldn't have wanted to, in the Depression era, in the 30s, says you wouldn't have wanted to go into a tavern or come out of a tavern or flash a dollar bill or a dime, out there. It said it would you would open yourself up, So there is that atmosphere there, and that's the thing that I picked up. And again, like you mentioned, the water. I think the water is a very
Yes.
strong energy. It's one of the elemental forces, primal
Oh.
forces.
Oh yeah, I live now. It's funny. I say I wouldn't live in San Pedro, but I live in Huntington Beach, which the community calls Hauntington Beach. And I live on a part of Huntington Beach below sea level, on an Indian burial ground where they've actually found in the wetlands by my house Indian burial bowls. So it's no joke. It's a burial ground. It's why they can't develop that area. And it's an active place. I have 3 to 5 salt lamps and selenite wands in every room of my house. And I have a cat, so everything stays balanced. But I can feel it on the peripheral edges. I feel how haunted it is. I was just thinking the other night, I want to get one of those Bell and Howell flood lamps for the front and the back, just to keep them from wandering around the house. But this energy in San Pedro, I mean, it's a lot. And I think that I always think about, because I grew up in a very active negative house like the San Pedro house outside of Baltimore before we moved to California when I was 13. And now knowing Christopher Lutz and knowing Andrea Perrin and how they grew up in the Conjuring house and the Amityville house respectively, I grew up in the same kind of house, but we all kept it very quiet. Nobody knew, nobody talked about it. Seeing this documentary that you made about the San Pedro haunting made me wonder, like, how many other people in that town were living with that same kind of craziness and just never told anybody, or just never put two and two together of what it was. They thought they were going crazy. Maybe they went and got meds. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it didn't occur to them it was actually happening.
Yeah. Well, there was a lady I met after the haunting investigation in '89. She happened to be a lady that was a housekeeper, like a freelance housekeeper. She was cleaning my home at the time. And she found out about the San Pedro case. I told her a little bit about it, and she told me a story about she was dating a gentleman lived about 3 blocks away from that house, and that she saw almost the same old man, the decayed-looking old man, appeared and tried to hold her down, and she never went back to that house where she was with her friend at that time. I believe it just absolutely terrified her. I don't know if he saw it, but I know she saw it. So I thought, this thing was kind of a have ghost travel story. It was not exactly rooted. They definitely had some connection to the house, but it looked like, again, it could travel and I guess like a psychic predator of some kind.
Right. Now, do you think it was actually the spirit of a person who had died? Because when I was watching the documentary, my psychic hit on it was that it was either an earth spirit, a ground spirit, or it was something in the negativity demonic family. And oftentimes those kinds of spirits, elementals, will make themselves seem like a person to kind of con you into thinking, oh, it's just a decrepit old man, or, oh, it's just a little girl who needs my help, right? When I see the ghost of a little girl, I automatically go, is that a demon? Because it always seems like really negative hauntings. It's always like, I saw a little girl and then she threw me out the window. So I was wondering, just with the energy of it, if it was something that either was trying to claim that land and didn't want anybody there. And that would make sense if people in the neighborhood were also seeing it, because it was definitely trying to recapture part of the land.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it also, like you said, could be possibly demonic in the form of something else, changing its form. There was an interesting thing about it, though, that the fact that it hanged a guy who worked with me at the time and put a cord around his neck. And that cord was rather interesting because it was tied in a bowline knot, which is traditionally a seaman's knot, a knot that doesn't slip. Right. And then we found seashells in the attic. There was salt water that I guess it poured out of a light switch. Everything seemed to lead back to the sea. So it could be some very powerful human spirit of someone who once lived and died there. Of course, that house had been lived in by God knows how many longshoremen and seamen over the years. It was built in about 1905, that house. So it's hard to say, but I'm open to the fact that it could be something, like a demonic force that isn't able to impersonate a human-like force. And I will tell you one thing that a lot of people do not know. When Jackie moved out, it eventually kind of faded away. It did follow her for a while.
That was my next question. Isn't that strange? That was the next thing I was going to ask you was did she have problems afterwards?
She did. It was followed her to a place called Weldon in a mobile home. And it was about maybe 200 or 300 miles up north in Kern County. And she called me 5 months down the road, and she said that things were happening. She was hearing scratching sounds coming out of a storage shed behind the house. She saw the same kinds of lights that she had been seeing in San Pedro. And of course, Jeff, who was the man who was attacked in the original house, he never stepped foot back in that house. I couldn't blame him after technically being hanged in an attic.
Yes. Yeah.
Who would go back to that house? But he did. 5 months later, I give him credit. He was wanting to find an answer to what was going on. He had been extremely skeptical going into this. And he went back up there one night, and we watched a man, not that we normally play with Ouija boards, but someone had given her a Ouija board, and she said what was coming through there. She wanted to find out what it was that was bothering her all this time.
Sure.
And indeed, it spelled out very lucid answers and very rapid rate of speed, and the temperature dropped, and it actually levitated Jeff right in front of me and two witnesses, the babysitter, Tina Lawler, and Jackie, and it threw him into the wall where the wall meets the ceiling. That was the most singular, amazing event that I've ever seen. So it had followed her, absolutely.
Well, and Jeff was your photographer, and he had been going in rather skeptic, right? It's interesting
Very
how
skeptical.
especially the really negative entities, they always go after the skeptic. The skeptic always gets the worst of it.
Oh, yeah, he was extremely skeptical. In fact, the first night we went in was August 8th, 89. A little interesting side note, not that it makes have any bearing on it. I thought about that. That was the first night things did happen. All hell broke loose that night. That first night, August 8th, 89, was exactly 20 years to the killings of Sharon Tate.
Oh, wow.
By the Manson family. And not that had any bearing on it. I just thought it was an interesting synchronicity. But he was extremely skeptical. In fact, he whispered in my ear after hearing Jackie tell stories about an apparition of an old man and all the things that she was hearing in the attic. And he goes, it's going to be a long day in hell before I believe this story. And when she talked about, you know what I mean?
And the next thing you know, he's like,
extremely skeptical. There couldn't have been a more hardcore skeptic. And in fact, I had video equipment in the truck. I hadn't brought it in, not thinking anything would happen myself. I believed in ghosts, but I didn't think anything would happen that night. We've been on a lot of other things, and nothing happened. But that was one of the first ones that I think Jeff went with me on, maybe the first one that he went on with me. And she had mentioned seeing a disembodied head in her attic, as well as seeing the old man. And the head had a little bit more corpulent features to it. She reminded me like Alfred Hitchcock or something, of that kind of a head. And so I said, probably nothing's going to happen. He wanted to get out of there. And I said, well, Jeff, look, you got your still camera. Go up and take a couple pictures in the attic. She said, all this stuff's going on. And I said, then we'll leave. So he did. And this would prove to be the Pandora's box, because he goes up in the attic, he's taking pictures, and into his third shot, something actually physically pulls the camera out of his hands. And when I went up with video, I got my video camera, of course, out of the truck and fired it up. And as I went up there, my camera stopped. And I had a deck hooked up. It was an old 3/4 with a deck at the time, double system camera. And Jeff looking around, he found the body of his camera in the other side in a little fruit box, like a crate. And amazingly, the lens had been removed. You have to push a button and unlock the lens properly, not damaged. And it was lying port side up, the lens right behind the trap door. He had not even been on the other side of the attic. We could see him, up through the crawl space opening. So he really got a good dose of reality when that happened. And he came down, he was petrified. Of course, the first thing was, I want to get my camera back,
Yeah.
I want to find out if there's anyone that could be hoaxing this. Was there someone else in the attic? So I got a light, put it up there, and got the camera, went up. Of course, the camera went out, like I said, and there was no one else up there, nowhere to hide or anything. But you could walk in the center of the attic. The trusses went up like a V shape for support, and it was the tallest point in the middle of the attic. And so that's what happened. It was really that was the catalyst that really launched this whole affair. It was really amazing.
Sure. I find that sometimes these beings, the sentient, intelligent beings, there's a certain amount of ego that comes with them, and you not believing in them is insulting to them.
Yeah.
So they're going to show you, or you're not paying enough attention to them. I interviewed a guy, maybe 15 years ago, was doing a show with me where I was at the time. And he allegedly channeled this Lemurian being. And so I asked him to come do my show, because I was asking all the other hosts on the network to come and do my show, because that's how I am. And he came and he said, do you want to interview me or do you want to interview the being, whatever the being's name was? I said, no, I want to interview you about your life as an artist and your channeling and how it works. So I interviewed him. I don't think anybody had ever wanted to interview him before because mostly people want the beings that can get their psychic answers, right?
Right.
So we're just chit-chatting and he says, well, next time I come, you should really let me channel, so and so. And I was like, yeah, okay, but I'm really interested in you. So I'm engineering my own show, right? And I'm putting the commercial break together and I look down, I look up, and that thing is staring at me. That man is gone and that being is staring at me. And I could tell it was like, well, it didn't understand why I wasn't, falling down at my feet in front of him for all of his psychic answers. And it was a little insulted. So I
Right.
just ignored it. I went right back to doing my commercial break. I checked my phone. I looked back 5 minutes later and the channeler was back.
Wow.
But I think sometimes there's an ego that comes with these beings.
Yeah.
And they want you to pay attention to them.
Yeah, this was definitely very aggressive. It seemed like it had its own personality. And again, it really went after Jeff. And maybe because of that skepticism,
that statement he made. Yeah.
Because it didn't just attack, it attacked him a number of times, not just once or twice.
Well, and they're oftentimes looking for attention too, right? Like, why are you not paying attention to me? And they'll keep escalating their behavior until the people who live in the house pay attention. And if you fight with them, that house that I lived in, I had an Irish Scorpio mother, Depression era. She would yell, you get out of my house, you blibbity blip, blobbity blop. And then the activity would be, 10 times as much and all directed at her.
Oh yeah.
And because if you give them attention, they'll roll with it. If you don't give them attention, they'll try to get attention. It's kind of a lose-lose situation. And I think we all pray, I know I did when we left that house, the way that Jackie probably did, that it's not going to follow you to the next place. But I think if it likes chewing on your delicious energy, it does.
Yeah. When we were doing the Ouija board that night up in Weldon, when all this psychokinetic phenomena was happening, I mean, the table would shake violently, the candles would blow out one by one. She'd relight them and it would blow out again one by one after a minute or so. You could feel, Jeff and I talked about, you could feel the energy just sapping right out of your body.
Yeah.
And I remember, I know Jeff and I both, we were like drained for a couple of weeks. It seemed like it took us a couple of weeks to get like re-energized. It was just so draining. I think that you're right. They do use your energy.
Oh, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why people that live in homes like that over periods of time, they become very emotionally and spiritually compromised. I mean, look at Kathy Lutz, right? She got very sick right after they left that house and was sick her whole life and died very young. I mean, I think they most definitely target you and do what they can to drain from you. And as an investigator, and I tell my little budding investigators this all the time, prepare yourself and protect yourself before you go into these places. It's no joke. And make sure that you have something, whether you like an amulet or something that means something to you on you. Make sure you sleep. Make sure you eat. Make sure you hydrate. Don't go in there on 2 hours sleep because you want to make sure you're strong, right?
Exactly. I know I always kind of subscribe to the idea that you should kind of envision bright white light, healing light around you,
Yes, white light protection prayers.
I don't think it hurts to do that,
No.
And I think it's very good. I mean, I know a lot of people have tried things, and obviously they still affect them. And like my girlfriend, she's has a case right now going on, which is sort of like the entity, which she's being attacked. She's trying all kinds of ways to cleanse it and get rid of it. But so far, it's still attacking her. Not as much as it used to, but it's still going on. And we have all of that documented on camera. So
it's wonderful. Again, are you gonna do a documentary about that? Is she okay to share that story with the world?
Oh yes. In fact, we have interviews already shot with her, and I have a lot of things. Unfortunately, with her actually being physically attacked in bed. on camera.
Mm.
And you can see the blankets pulsing on top of her. And again, big, huge balls of light moving through the bedroom. There are lights outside. We have infrared cameras set up all around the perimeter of the house, in the bedroom, in the dining room. And one night we actually tried, I wanted to do an experiment. I said, let's try playing some religious music. Since I grew up Catholic, I said, let's try Ave Maria,
Oh, sure.
And I said, let's just try that. And we played it, on the TV off YouTube or something. And I would turn up the volume. And granted, we were rolling cameras just to see. And sure enough, a strange, wispy, like white mist came into the house, materialized. We have it all on camera. It starts wafting through the dining room. And inside that mist, you can see orbs of light moving in that. And one thing looks sort of rectangular shape. And it comes up out of it. And you can see it almost a face looking out at you as it's moving by. So again, my focus is to try to document it. But she's a really brave girl. She's been through a lot, and I'm hoping to find a solution to it at some point. It's a very tough thing because it's been going on for 16 years. It's very similar to the Barbara Hershey movie, The Entity.
Yes, I was thinking about that. Yes, that Dr. Barry Taft worked on, right?
Yeah, the gentleman I used to work with worked on that with Carrie Gaynor back in '74, and we knew. We also knew Frank De Felitta, who was passed on. He was the guy who wrote the book and did he was there on set when he did the movies as well. I think he wrote the screenplay too. I'm not positive. It was a great movie.
Yeah, definitely. Wonderful movie. Very underrated movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that happens to people, right? You gotta hope it's the house, because sometimes it's you. Sometimes what they want is you. I was so thankful in our case, it was just the house. But one of the scariest nights of my life was the first night in the new house, because I was so scared it was just going to be us and it was all going to come back.
Yes, exactly. Well, it is something I forgot to mention, Sheena, was the fact that, Melody is, she's very interested in, obviously wants to get to the bottom of what's happening with her. Sure. But she is very interested in other places that are haunted, like the San Pedro case. And we went down there last summer back to the house. It was in July.
Oh, so wow.
Over a year ago. Now, the house, believe it or not, is still there. It's been slightly remodeled, repainted. A little bit's changed, but it's still there and it's still being rented out. And we spoke with Jesse Segala, who is the current owner. He was not the owner of the house back when this originally transpired.
Okay.
And I said, is there anything going on now? He said, I'm still renting it. And he said, I haven't heard anything that's going on. He said, they won't go in the attic. So I said, I don't blame them for not going in the attic. I guess there's 2 or 3 people who live in the house. So they were out of town. And again, this was in July. It was in daylight. It was in the afternoon. And I had my little 4K DSLR camera. I said, you mind if we take a few videos or pictures? And he said, no. So he went back with us, and Melody was there, and I was taking a shot of her with him. And she tells me right away, she goes, I feel it. There's something still here. I said, really? Now, I didn't see anything. And then I shot, I had a wide, like an 18 millimeter lens on the camera. And then I had it there, and you could see to the right of the house, which was bathed in shade. It was shaded. The sun wasn't hitting that part of it. But where they were, I believe it was sunny. So when we look back on the video, I only shot like a minute's worth, and we left. And when I got back, again, we didn't get to go in the house, obviously. But when I got back and looked at it here in my little studio here, there's a ball of light that comes up. It shoots very fast, shoots in front of them, and obliterates Jesse's face. You have to slow it down to see it. Then it moves to the right side of the house, then shoots back into the house and disappears. And it's a comet of light with a tail, and it has the same signature, identical to the same lights that I photographed or videotaped 34 years ago. So something is still there. Something's still in that house.
Wow. But the new tenants don't notice it, or do you think they just don't talk about it?
It could be they don't talk about it, or maybe it's something more minimal, or it could be that certain people serve as a catalyst. Maybe they have the right kind of energy that it sucks from, or draws from. I know there was one interesting thing that happened in 2004. Another family moved out, the Rosara Luna family. It's in my book that I did on the case called An Unknown Encounter. And they called me down there to do a Halloween story. It was in October. And there was a photographer from the News Pilot paper. He says, "Hey, you want to go back up?" I said, "Well, why not?" I said, "It's been a while. I didn't think anything was there anymore." And so I went up with him, and there was a writer there writing the story. And he was trying to take a few pictures. And believe it or not, when we were up in the attic, his camera didn't work. It didn't work for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Wow.
And then it worked.
Wow.
You got a picture. And I took a few pictures outside, and I saw streaks of light on the outside of the house. And I took some pictures at home like the next day, and there was a big bright comet of light shooting across my home here where I live now. I've lived here for a long time. So it followed me back just to let me know it was still there, and it could be a half ghostful travel entity.
Oh, and I think that's very true. I also think sometimes people don't notice, they're not open. So when I watched your documentary on YouTube, I looked in Jackie's eyes, and there was definitely an untapped empathy in there. So some people are empaths and sensitives, and they don't know.
Yeah.
So because they don't know what they are, they haven't learned how to protect themselves. So when
Right.
I looked into her eyes, I saw that there was a very much an openness inside of there that she didn't know what to do with. So things were just coming into her, and she didn't know how to get rid of them. And I think that's very common, and that happens a lot. Now, I think in the Amityville case, I think that Kathy Lutz and Christopher, who's now Christopher Quarantino, I think they had that openness as well. Chris saw, when he first went in that room in the basement with the red paint, he asked the realtor where the bodies were. He could feel the DeFeo murders, even though I think he was like 7. So I think that is when they really get you, is when you have that untapped empathic ability that you don't know what it is, and you're susceptible to them. But even for complete non-empaths, so my mom and I were both psychics, although she never talked about it at the time, and I didn't know what it was. I was in puberty, so perfect storm, right? My father, who probably would have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Back then, we just called people on the autism spectrum engineers. He believed in nothing. He was a lapsed Catholic, total atheist. He liked robots more than people. He kept waiting for that Isaac Asimov world to come where the robots ran everything. And all the while we were there, it was always, "Oh, you girls and your crazy fantasy, and you girls and you girls." So years later, like when I was in my 40s, I produced a paranormal documentary that I was in. Friends of mine had bought an Airbnb in Washington that was extremely haunted. And I brought it to show my parents at Christmas. And when my dad saw machines getting evidence, because machines were his BFFs. So when he saw the tape recorders, the video cameras, the EMF meter, it suddenly opened up this whole new understanding for him, because guess what? The little robots believed. And he looked at us and he said, when we lived in that house, every night at 3:00 in the morning, a Franciscan monk would walk through the wall and come sit on the end of my bed and stare at me, and then get up and walk back out through the wall. But I didn't think it was paranormal. So then the next hour was my mother completely losing her shit. Like, "What did you think that was? And all that time you told us we were crazy." But for him, it didn't register as paranormal. I don't know what he thought. Maybe it was the ghosts of Catholicism coming to get him for leaving the church. I don't know what he thought, but he didn't think it was a paranormal encounter until he saw machines picking up paranormal stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think a lot of people live in the middle of it, and they're just in this kind of weird, not a conscious denial, but an unconscious denial, because they're just justifying it as something else, right?
That's true. That's very true. I think, and it's like, it's a lot of people are so skeptical today. We live in such a secular world, and there's just so skeptical out there that I think until it happens to them,
Yes.
they're never going to believe. But when it happens to them, that could change their whole life. That could change their whole way of looking at things. And,
Yes.
the invisible world is all around us all the time. But when it happens to them, that's a different story. And so, like I say with Jeff Wheatcraft, well, I'm sorry he got hanged. At least he didn't die or anything like that.
I'm sorry he got hanged.
But if it's going to happen to someone, I guess it's good that it happened to a skeptic, because now he knows. He knows it's there now.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Boy, the look on his face when he was coming down from that attic.
Yeah.
After he got hung, I was like pure. It was like the way somebody looks when they get shot by a gun and they're not quite sure where they're shot, and the pain hasn't sunk in yet because they're still in shock.
Oh yeah.
He just seemed like he was. I didn't think he was going to be able to get out of that tiny hole and down onto that stepladder.
Oh yeah. And Gary Boehm is the guy who I went to high school with back in Ohio. He was living out here then. He's back in Ohio now, and he was skeptical. He was pretty skeptical, not as much maybe as Jeff, but he was skeptical too. And he always talked about just how fast that happened. The fact that Jeff had taken one step and Gary was a little bit in front of him. Gary was going to come over to the opening because I had a really, like you say, empathic feeling, I guess, of being watched. It was, I don't know if I've ever had one ever since like that. Except you can, like you said, you can feel that energy when you go into the town of San Pedro. But this was like something was right there staring at me. And I felt it, and I had a camera. I hadn't turned the camera on yet. I was below the attic. And I remember that right after that, there were 3 snapping sounds. Just like that. Just 3 snaps, sound like a finger snaps. Jackie heard it. Susan heard it. I heard it. And that's when I said, you guys better come down because there's something going on down here. So Gary turned away from Jeff. He went towards the opening. And as soon as he did that, I had just had a feeling something was going to happen. I turned the camera on. If I had turned it on another second later, I wouldn't have got that, because you hear him kind of a groan coming from the center of the attic where Jeff was located. And Jeff comes down, of course, and I didn't really know what had happened once I was filming it. So he came down. I saw the clothesline cord, the old weathered clothesline cord around his neck. And of course, I interviewed him right there. I said, and he was kind of, you could tell he was very disoriented. And he even has got cobwebs hanging off of his hair a little bit. And he said,
he doesn't, it's the scariest thing is he comes out of the attic. He doesn't know what's around his neck, right? He doesn't know what's happening. He knows something happened, but this thing is kind of haphazardly hanging around his neck, and there's a red line from the choking, and he doesn't seem to understand that any of that is happening. He doesn't understand what's going on. He just knows something happened.
That's right.
And that thing was creepy. And the thing about it was that it was so tight. The fact he didn't know it was being put around his neck when it was pretty tight going over his head. It's not like it was some giant long piece of rope. I mean, it was tiny.
That's right. And, Gary always said, well, I can't believe it. It's just amazing how fast did it happen, how it got him into that position, wrapped around that nail. It was so fast. Well, I figure, if you're not in a body anymore, this is a spirit entity of some kind.
Sure.
The body, of course, if a person's going to do it, it's going to take some maneuvering to get them in there. It's going to be a struggle to do that physically if someone's purposely trying to attack him. But this is an entity. This is an entity. This is a force beyond anything we could understand. And like I said, if Gary hadn't bent the nail down, Jeff could very well have died up there in that attic. The reason that we got the photographs, they went up there with Jeff didn't even have his camera that night, and I gave Gary a little point and shoot camera. I said, just in case something happens, I said, get a picture. My whole focus was document. And fortunately, he actually got pictures. The reason he got the pictures is because when Jeff cried out behind him, he was using the flash because everything went dark. He was trying to see where Jeff was. And he got a wide shot. He got up a little closer and got that tight shot. And luckily, they came out with that flash.
And Jeff's eyes like bugging out of his head. I mean, the whole thing is terrifying.
Oh yeah.
It's a terrifying thing. And it's funny because you address in the documentary about how people believe ghosts can hurt you, and that's not true. I think that's a complete misnomer. People get thrown down the stairs all the time. I was
Yeah.
working in a theater in 2018 doing a musical. It had horrible energy, and I kept telling people something is wrong with this theater. The energy's bad. And the owners kept saying, "Oh, well, the previous owner, she didn't want to leave," and that, and a couple times it messed with me. So I'm standing in the wings, right? And it has a door, and the door is one of those that has the long bar that you have to push to open it. And on the
Oh,
other
sure.
side of the door, there's nothing. So the door cannot be opened from the outside unless it's already cracked open. And
Already
I'm
cracked
staying there
open.
waiting to go on, and all of a sudden I hear boom, like somebody hit the door, and the thing just opens. And I just said, "I know you're there, and I'm not paying any attention to you." Well, opening night, I'm leaving one of the scenes on the stage, and this thing, it felt like somebody kicked me in my lumbar spine, like it hit me from behind.
Oh
And I
yeah.
flew forward. Thank God my face landed in a nice man's lap. Some nice soft testicles saved me from breaking my neck, but I could have very easily broken my neck. And
Oh my God, yes.
mess my knees up forever. My knees are still not the same and probably won't be without surgery. But I know there was nobody behind me. Everybody was off the stage, and
Oh
it
yeah.
just felt like a kick. And with a sold out opening night, if somebody had kicked me in the back, somebody would have seen it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so I know it was that theater. It didn't want us there for some reason. It didn't want anybody there for some reason. It was new owners. They probably didn't like them. And but that kind of thing can happen. Ghosts can hurt you. They can
Absolutely.
drain you. You can get pneumonia from your immune system being drained. People have this idea like, "I'm going to go in the house and I'm going to go, screw you, demon. I want you to possess me." And I'm like, "You guys, and you don't want that.
Oh
That's not
yeah.
good. You don't want
Yeah.
to be inviting things to possess you, because you don't know what's out there. And we live in a free will environment here on the earth, and if you ask something to come in and do that, you're telling it it's okay."
Oh yeah. And the fact that the guy levitated right in front of us, that could have killed him too if he hit
Yes.
hard enough.
Right.
I've never seen anything like that. It was right in front of me. Right in front of me. Everybody says, "Why didn't you get that on camera?" Well, it wasn't for lack of trying. I had a camera there set up. I had a camera. Again, right before we started that Ouija board, the batteries didn't work. I plugged it in. The AC didn't work. Not until all of this had transpired.
Wow.
Then I noticed the camera came back on, but it was all over at that point. So
Wow.
they can
Now,
they can do
I'm
that.
sorry. Are you
They can
still
do
in
that.
are you still in contact with Jackie? Do you know what happened to her? Is she okay?
I haven't spoken with her for quite some time. The last time I saw her was we did a show called Paranormal Witness back maybe about
Sure.
8 or 9, 10 years ago. And I
Sure.
understand that she's living with. I just speak with a friend named Eric who knows her, and we was talking about her the other day. He stays in touch with her, and trying to think, she's living still. Believe it or not, she was living in Long Beach, but she's back in San Pedro, obviously
Oh.
at a different house.
Jackie. Oh, Jackie. Oh,
Back in San
Jackie.
Pedro.
Oh,
But I
no.
believe she's working for her parents. They have an accounting firm or something like that. So she seems to be much happier, and all this stuff has kind of drifted away now. So
Okay.
that's
And
good for her.
how are her kids? Because they were in there at a very impressionable age.
Yeah, the boy, I understand. I think he might have been in the military, but he's fine. He's getting in some other business. And the little girl, the little baby daughter, who had the blood spot on her forehead out on the porch that night. She's a mother of her own now. She's got a child or two of her own now. I understand, but I believe she lives in the general vicinity down there. I haven't seen her for a long time, but I understand everybody's fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever seen another case like that in your career? Because you've done a
No,
lot of stuff. And
nothing like that. There was one case, and I have it all documented in a place called Virginia City, Nevada.
Sure.
In
Yeah.
2018 in the Bonanza Saloon up there. And it's an old saloon. They had it closed down for us. I was invited up by Doug Carnahan. He used to invite me up every year to speak at the Paracon. for Virginia City Paracon. He's a great guy. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, but he
That's
invited us
right.
up to check
Yes.
it out. A lot of things were going on. Cowboys, dangerous cowboy spirits, and all kinds of things were invading the basement area. And we had a psychic named Ellen McFarland. She's with the Napa Valley group, and Devin Zisk, I believe his name is, and Jay and Marie Yates were there. They're equally good, great ghost hunters of their own right. They were there. Jay was thrown against the wall, not levitated, thrown against the wall by a force, and a black shadow or mass appeared above them. I was up at the bar area with the gentleman watching on like what we're doing now on a cell phone on FaceTime. And you could see the black mass forming over them. And then we all had to run down there because she was attacked. Things started moving around inside of a box. Some papers were moving. We have it all on camera. I had Twitter camera guys down there. And then she was attacked and was knocked out. And she slumped over at one point. But fortunately, she came to and she was okay. Some force came into her at that point. But nothing like the San Pedro case, not for sheer physical phenomena. I don't think there's any case I've ever experienced like that.
Yeah, it's a big one. I think in our country's history, it's one of the biggest ones, especially from the 20th century. I think it's one of the biggest ones there is. Now you have a couple of documentaries out on Amazon now, right? And what are some of the places that you covered there?
Well, they can, if anyone wants to see it. I mean, it's on YouTube, obviously, but I think Tubi has An Unknown Encounter. And Amazon Prime has it. And I believe Tubi also has another show that I did called California's Most Haunted.
Oh, yes, yes. I haven't seen that one yet. I'm excited.
Oh, go to Tubi and watch that. Because I did a story in that we have the San Pedro case kind of abbreviated, at the end. Right. But we have another case in there where a gentleman named Daniel, he recorded an actual apparition that appeared on camera in a hospice unit called Granada Hills Hospice. Yeah, it's all torn down now. But there was a lot of nurses reporting strange activity in this one little storage room. It used to be an examination room. Things would move, objects would move. And so Daniel heard about it. A friend of his was there at the hospital. And he asked them to come up to visit him. He said, "Hey, do you mind if I bring my camera?" And he asked the nurse if I could put it in the closet while I go to lunch. And he recorded in the dark in the closet. And when he got back and looked at the tape, it was back in 1988, so it was all tape then. This like luminous, very low-key little dim ball of light kind of floats up to the camera and forms into a human face of a male. Looks like a middle-aged male, 40s or 50s, and very clearly. And it was a little dark, but they had to enhance it. Steve Neal, who did the effects for Star Trek and Ghostbusters, Fright Night, did a lot of movies.
Beautiful.
He analyzes it on camera, and he had to bring up the luminance values, and sure enough, that's a face. And it's really weird because there's one frame. If you look at that, we slowed it down on that show. If you watch that show, California's Most Haunted, you'll see it. One frame, it turns into a skull, and then it turns back into a face, like a human face.
Wow.
And why? Well, again, it's energy. So I guess
I don't know. It can turn into whatever it wants, right? That's just how it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wonderful. And where can people find that?
They can go to Tubi and watch it. It's also supposed to be on Amazon Prime. Now, I haven't seen it on Amazon Prime per se. It was delivered, but it could be on Fire Stick. I'm not sure. If you get a Fire Stick, they call it, it's like the Roku stick. It might be on that. I'm not sure, but I know you can see it on Tubi right now. And there's a trailer for it, and it's got the other stuff. I have Alcatraz on there and Whaley House, the traditional places. And,
that's beautiful.
And I have the real story of the Entity case. The Entity case with Frank De Felitta. Frank De Felitta and Mort Zarkoff. Frank talks about what he witnessed with Mort Zarkoff, and he talks about it because that was a case that Barry Tapp was involved with, and Carrie Gaynor, where Dick Thompson, who we also interviewed, he got pictures of arcing lights over the woman sitting on the bed.
Those light arcs were amazing in that case.
Yeah, and a full-body apparition of a very muscular-looking entity, a man, like bathed in a greenish light, appeared in front of them and in front of like maybe 10 other witnesses. They were from UCLA at that
Wow.
time. So it's
Wow.
they
Wow.
should watch that story. It's a great story.
I can't wait to see it. It's on Tubi.
It's on Tubi, absolutely.
It's
Just type in
fantastic.
California's Most Haunted.
Will you come back and do this again and bring Melody and we'll talk about what she's going through? I would love that.
I sure will. And I mentioned one last thing. I am there's another show about ready to go online. I'll post it on my Facebook. I did a show called Case Files Unknown. It appeared on Destination America in 2015.
Oh, wonderful.
And I will mention in that show, there's a story, probably the best picture photograph I've ever seen ever of a soul leaving its body. It was taken by a police officer in Minnesota in 2004, I believe. Or no, I believe it was, no, I'm sorry. No, it was like 84, way before that, before digital photography. And he took pictures of an accident site. A boy had died. A young 16-year-old boy, they slammed into a tree. They were on their way to a concert. Everybody else survived, but he unfortunately broke his neck when he hit the windshield on the impact with this tree in this vehicle. The police came in, took pictures. Above the car is his spirit looking down, his head, very clearly a face, looking down, screaming. It looked like he's screaming, no, like I'm out of my body, I'm on my way. And not only that, the body in the car is ejecting photons. You can see clear photons of light ejecting out of the body.
Wow.
And light, all streamers of light around the car. So watch for that. That'll be coming out real soon.
Yeah,
Case Files
I can't
Unknown.
wait.
Yep.
Keep me posted. Thank you so much for being here, my friend. The wonderful Barry Conrad, everybody. It's always a joy to have you here. And I can't wait to talk more about you and hear about what's going on in your own home. It's a pleasure to talk to you always. And please give Melody my best. We'll get her on soon. I sure will. She would love to do that. Absolutely. That's awesome. If you missed any of those links, you can go to SheenaMetalSpiritual.com. That's me, SheenaMetalSpiritual.com. Also, you can text me, 818-437-0886, and say hi. And we'll get to know each other. My website has all the info for all your psychic and spiritual needs and a little bit about my life in the entertainment world. And until I see you next time, seek peace. Live in love, lead with kindness, embrace unity, always work to raise your vibration and know that you are love and you are loved and you're so loved by me. I'm Sheena Metal. This is the Sheena Metal Experience. Thank you to KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network, to my engineer and producer, Emery, and to my wonderful program director, Bill Forte, and also to Barry Conrad, my fantastic guest. I'll see you next time. Take care. Every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. I'm Sheena Metal. This is the Sheena Metal Experience. We'll see you next week. Stay spooky.